The presentation was okay, but that thought you had?
When companies work human, people stay through anything.
Your quick thinking saved us. You saw something. It changed everything. You may think we don't see you, but I'm so glad you were the one in the room with me.
When people are recognized, they feel seen. They feel they belong.
Good job.
Because without the human, it's just work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are here today to talk about the current state of human connections at work. And it's a great topic. There's been so much change and evolution in the past few years. And as this was evolving, we realized that there are some common misconceptions that we're hearing pretty consistently about the state of the workplace and where we're all headed. So our plan for today was to identify those myths and discuss what that really means for our current state. So I think this is going to be a really great discussion, and we're just thrilled that you've joined us here today. Thank you for coming. I'm your host, Erin Avery. I'm a Senior Strategic Advisor here at Workhuman, and I'm here today with John Baldino, who's the President of Humoriso. And so first, to get started, we'll give you some brief introductions on ourselves and our organizations. So I'll start and give you some background around Workhuman. Here at Workhuman, we are in the thank you business. So we're a software company based in Dublin, Ireland, and just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we have the goal of bringing more humanity to the workplace. And we do that through employee recognition programs, through performance solutions, and through celebrations and life events programs. We have millions of employees around the globe who are experiencing the power of recognition through our platform on a day-to-day basis. And personally, I've worked at Workhuman in a variety of roles over the last 7.5 years. And it's been such a great journey for me personally. I've gotten to work with some of the biggest global brands around the world, like Merck and Dell and Johnson & Johnson. And one of the reasons that I love my job is that in partnering with these organizations, we kind of get a front row seat of seeing how they're supporting their people strategies and helping them transform their cultures. And so it's been very interesting to see everything in the HR space evolving over the last few years. And I'm hoping to bring some of those insights into the discussion today. And then John, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and about Humoriso?
Sure, thank you. So I'm John Baldino. I have been in the HR space for 30 years, yikes. And I've had the privilege of being involved in a variety of organizations and industries in that time. And for the last 10 years, I have been the president, actually the founder of Humoriso as a global HR consulting firm. And it's been a whirlwind, right, in those 10 years, particularly the last 2 years. And what I would say is, this is the time of human resources in many ways, right? There are a lot of organizations looking to HR to answer and lead a lot of components in organizations that perhaps previously we were checked in with, but weren't asked to lead. And so that's really changed a bit, and the demand for it continues to be high. One truth for us at Humoriso is about 90 days after the pandemic first hit in March of 2020, we were down about 33% in terms of our business because of the clients that we support as a consulting firm. And I'm sitting here today, the past 16 months or so later, that we are 38% up in growth. And so that's making up for that 33% plus an additional 38. So that just gives you a sense of, from my little organization, right, what the demand is when it comes to HR and how much we're being asked to have a voice as to how we're going to lead organizations moving forward.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's such a great point that the stakes are higher than ever. And how great is it that HR is being invited to the table more and more to be a true part of the business and
Right.
influence. And I think people are realizing what's the reason behind that. People are the most critical part of any organization. So,
Absolutely.
and that's leads right into our discussion today and our 5 myths that we have here on the screen. So after 2 years of the pandemic, we've all heard these certain truths about work. And, there definitely was a time where these things were probably in fact valid, but what we wanted to do today was take a critical lens of whether or not these are things that are still serving businesses well today. And so we want to take that scrutiny and that critical eye to these topics and couple that with some of the most recent data that we have from Workhuman and from external sources about human connection at work. So the 5 myths that we'll be talking about today are that work culture is evolving because of the pandemic, that work from home will be the thing that saves it all, that the importance of ping pong tables or the office perks, just keep saying I'm sorry, and that the Great Resignation will end business as we know it. So obviously really critical topics. Hopefully these right from the get-go resonate. And we just want to have the understanding that take a look at these so that we're not holding ourselves back and holding our businesses back, and that we're really looking at the root causes of what's going on, and can challenge ourselves to go a layer deeper. So without further ado, let's jump into myth number 1. So this one is sort of the one to tee it all up, that work culture is evolving because of the pandemic. And so this is the one that we wanted to debunk first. And so the perception is that the pandemic has caused all of this, but the reality is that it was happening before that, and that these headlines are here to prove it, that, Workhuman, we've been doing this since 1997, long before the pandemic. And you can see these headlines about job satisfaction and engagement and employee burnout coming from well before the pandemic. So John, tell us a little bit about what you've seen on your side in Humoriso, and were these things that you were encountering in your business prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the headlines that everyone can see here are dated pre-pandemic, but I think that what happened with the pandemic is that some organizations sort of substituted an evolving work process and workflow for work culture. And they're not the same thing. And so, if organizations weren't attentive to the way in which their culture was evolving and changing, because quite frankly, the world was already changing. Things like remote work, hybrid work, I know this is going to be shocking, were actually happening before the pandemic. I know, right? Frightening, but it was, it was happening. And so obviously, with mandates and due to the pandemic and the way in which cities and states have responded, countries responded to it, it accelerated how many organizations were participating in those things. And so that is true, right? But is culture evolving because of the pandemic? No, it was already on its way. The pandemic, quite frankly, just kind of kicked it about 10 yards further downfield from where it was. And that's where I think organizations really get in trouble if they blame or point to this pandemic as being the reason why these things are happening in our organization. Probably not looking at the right thing.
Yeah, and why do you think they get in trouble? Is it this they're scapegoating and they're ignoring the actual reason and sort of?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's easy to say, that darn COVID, shake your fist, it changed, that ruined everything. I don't know that it ruined everything. I mean, I will say, specifically at Humoriso, not speaking about, the tons of clients we support, even in our own organization, we already had an appetite for remote work pre-pandemic, right? Our staff are all over the country, so they weren't coming into an office, they were working remotely. But having the pandemic sort of push even more of those things, because we had to support clients that now had to go through this. We heard a lot of the scapegoating. We heard a lot of business owners and C-suite executives saying, if only, then we wouldn't be. And quite frankly, the if only is not if only this pandemic didn't happen. It really is if only I had paid more attention to my people, to what they were asking for, to how work was actually getting done. We're even more productive as a remote organization than we were, again, even pre-pandemic, because we've become so nimble with it. So it's possible. It can't be the pandemic.
Well, and I think that's such an interesting point, and I think it leads into, you know, the importance of listening to employees, and not just on a surface level, but really, really listening. And in order to do that, which it can be difficult because as humans, I think it can be scary almost of, first of all, everyone's running to and fro and trying to keep up in day to day. So it takes some time and effort to pause and really listen. But then also, what if I hear something I don't want to hear, or or that I don't know what to do with? Yes. But one thing that I've seen that's coming to that seems to be a trend, especially in the last couple of years, is psychological safety becoming much more of a key focus for so many organizations, and employees wanting to work at a place that has psychological safety. And I'm sharing on the screen a quote from Amy Edmondson at Harvard University about what psychological safety means, the idea that people can come to work as their true selves, and that they can raise their ideas, their opinions, even they can say, this is something I'm concerned about and worried about, and be able to talk it through, and not be ashamed for doing that. And so, John, is this something that you've seen in your work as well? And how do you think this is coming to play in the workplace?
Well, and we know that, you know, there have been other world events besides the pandemic, right? So the social considerations, the cultural considerations, the racial considerations, right, heritage considerations have forced conversations around inclusiveness and equity more than diversity. You know, taking it to that next layer or two deeper. You know, if you're going to have an inclusive culture, how could this not be true, right? What everybody sees on the screen. How could it not be true? Because if that's not true, then I dare say, I don't know that you have an inclusive culture. And so you can say that you have a company or a corporate value around inclusion. Big deal. If this, you can print anything you want on those values. If this isn't true, then you don't.
Right. And I think that it's a critical thing for what you're calling out is that it's not enough to just say it, but to actually live it. And you have to bring and this is where it's hard. These are big challenges, but you have to bring your employees on this journey as this evolves. You have to bring managers and train them and help them see how do they this doesn't necessarily come naturally to every person, but as an organization, how do we bring people so that they get those skills to learn how to create trust with their employees and help them build their leadership skills when it comes to this in this respect. And I think employees are really starting to expect this in their workplace. And
absolutely. Yeah, no question of that. And I love this quote, you know, for all of what it says, but the last bit about even with mistakes. If we're really inclusive and considerate and equitable, we have to remember that not everybody is coming into the organization with the same world experiences, same life experiences, same context, right? So if someone isn't safe to even be wrong, then they're not going to try. They're not going to put their foot forward. Even if they're wrong, we don't provide an opportunity for them for someone to come up alongside of them and say, that may not be the best way to approach this. And here's why. Let me sort of expand your view, you know, the horizon that you're looking at. There's a little bit more to the picture to the left and to the right. Let me give you a little bit of context about what I see in my experience and what that brings to the table. And now someone can say, look, I know I'm wrong, but I so appreciate that I can be wrong and that you come up alongside me to help me to see something more. That's huge.
And what do we all learn from that? From giving him that ability and versus feeling that pressure to feel like I have to be perfect, or, am I going to get fired, or this or that? And so how much is gained through just the productivity and through finding things out sooner. So it's, I agree, it's really important. So let's dive into the second myth. Let's move along to number 2, because I feel like we could keep talking about each of them all day long. So we're going to have to keep ourselves in line here. So myth number 2, another big one, that work from home will save us. And obviously we already talked about this a little bit. With the pandemic, so many people were just thrusted into the experience of working from home immediately with almost no prep time for it. And where we've landed, and we've all learned so much, whether you worked remotely before, as you were saying, John, just the experience of, I've heard many people at Workhuman who were remote before the pandemic saying how it changed for them too, because everyone else was remote. And so it sort of evened the playing field a little bit, but just the idea of things have become, we have the intersection of 2D work versus 3D work, the idea of the employee and now you have the screen in between employees and colleagues. And so it's not just the face-to-face interaction, or just I'm sitting at my computer. Now it's, you're looking at your screen and having those social interactions as well. And I think part of this one too is just the reality of work from home. That was a very real thing in the beginning, but as things have evolved, it's not even the case for everybody anymore. You have industries like retail and manufacturing and healthcare where people are 100% back at work. And even we're seeing in other industries like banking and finance and software and government workers that 70, 75, 77% of workers are hybrid or in some way. And so it's just not necessarily the reality of where everything is. So John, can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned your experience at Human Reso and for your employees, and how has that changed as this has all taken place?
Well, and I think that, maybe even more so in some of the clients that we support too, right? The myth here, work from home will save us. Part of that is from what? What is it that you thought work from home was going to save you from? Like that. And if your answers are, turnover, it's going to save us from being obsolete. It's going to save us from being, old school. It's going to save us from whatever these monikers you may add are. That's not true, right? Work from home is not a magic pill. This isn't the Matrix. You're picking one over the other, and all of a sudden your entire reality is different. You may function differently in the way in which, right, work gets done by process. I'm sitting home instead of sitting at a cubicle. Okay, but is it answering the bad management that may be happening in your organization? Is it answering the lack of clarity in objectives where the organization is going from leadership? Is it answering the need for equitable approaches to the way in which work gets done? No, it's not saving you from any of those other things. And actually, we know there's a lot of organizations that are mandating some level of hybrid work now, right? There's got to be a portion of your time where you may return to a physical office. And some organizations you got to come back 5 days a week. And let alone, as you mentioned, Erin, right, the kinds of industries where that wasn't even an option, right? Like you just had to come to work physically because things had to get done. So if the goal is, I can finally work from home, now you might not be able to. And I'll add to that to say, I know plenty of employees who can work from home, who have asked to actually come back to the office.
Right.
Right?
It's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone.
and you're teeing up we have a couple of slides of just data to share of, and this is from there's a research report done by Workhuman's analytics and research team 2 years into COVID, the state of human connection at work. And this here, that remote workers feel less confident, that they feel more uneasy about change. And I suppose that when you see this, in some way, this surprised me when I first saw it, but then it also makes complete sense, because there are some good things. It's maybe I'm at home and I have more flexibility in my day-to-day, but I'm feeling more disconnected from my coworkers, and what's the impact of that? And then also seeing further that, you know, there's that lack of connection, but also feeling that people that have at least some interaction, that they feel more appreciation when they're interacting face to face. But then also the fact that we have to acknowledge that for people that are working remotely, or people that are hybrid, especially if you're going back to 2D, 3D work environment, all of these things add different elements to and can contribute to some of people feeling burnt out or overworked. I know that there are days where I'm zoomed out at the end of the day after being on
Really?
meetings.
That's so surprising.
And how that, you know, I'm sure we've all had that experience of feeling drained, of not just from meetings, but that digital impact. So I think that this is one where it also brings to light, like, let's not deflect from the issues at hand, and the world has changed. And I think one of the things that we were talking about, this question came up when we were preparing for this, of sort of, what would it take for you to do your best work? And is this, so much has changed in the environments that we're working in? Is it an opportunity to take a step back and question and innovate in a way, and say, from ourselves and from listening to employees, about what, you know, what is working and what isn't? You know, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this one, John, as well. And if you've seen anything that has, that you've learned from any of your customers that is particularly taking things in a positive direction.
I mean, I think that it's a great question. And I think that what some companies are realizing is, again, even in this myth around working from home saving you, that the work from home, it really isn't the issue, right? It's kind of a symptom. You're looking at it sort of surface oriented. And I think a lot of organizations are starting to do the deeper dive to say, oh, no, there's something systemically wrong here, right? If I have a fever, it doesn't necessarily mean that the fever is the problem. It's a symptom of something more going on potentially. And I think that anytime we're sort of prescriptive about bolting something on, hey, you can now work hybrid, as if we're doing someone a favor, you know, that's a symptom. Like, that's, you're focusing on surface oriented things, get to the deeper problem. And so when you ask a question like, what would it take for you to do your best work? One of the things that is now the responsibility, I think, very clearly for organizations, is define what best is, and sit with the people doing the work to ask them what best looks like. Because if your employee has one view and the manager has another view, and the director or leader of the manager has a third view, who's winning? How are we handling that? That, I think I'm seeing a lot more organizations having to sit and have the tough conversations to say, I think we're misaligned in quite a few places. We've been focusing on these surface, symptom-oriented things. Let's get to the core.
Yeah, I think hearing that is refreshing in two ways, in the sense that it's the drilling into the authentic message, and not just focusing on the surface level, because people see through that, and also just how subjective it all really is. And so again, the importance of listening to each other, and people, we're all human beings, and give and communicate and absorb information in different ways. And so these moments of reflection, of it's exciting and daunting at the same time, addressing these challenges, but it's also, I get excited about, what are we going to see? How are people going to evolve it? And I think it's great that we're going a layer deeper than we have in the past. And that segues very nicely into our third myth. This is one I think that John and I are both very excited to discuss. All you need is the ping pong table. So And I think, most people can probably picture what we're talking about. I think we saw, 5-10 years ago, it was more of this focus on the office perks and maybe some of the more surface level things. John, when we were prepping for this, you had some stories and insights about this, so I'm going to turn it over to you to add a little bit of color here.
I mean, absolutely, right? Like, I feel like I have been to every one of these offices that are pictured here and beyond, because so much of the office space, right, the physical space, had been transformed into almost, a micro city. I mean, I've gotten to be a partner to organizations where, dry cleaning's on site, all of your food is on site, the gym is on site, you can bank on site, you never have to leave. You never have to leave. And at some point, I think people started to look around and think, I've been here 13 hours today. How did that happen? Right? Because I remember walking into one organization and it was dimly lit, right? A black industrial ceiling, so very dark, with some track lighting, spotlights, and traffic lights. And as I walked in, I had a red light because the pathway, the concrete floors in front of me were painted as roadways. And a couple of skateboarders and scooters were coming by, and I needed to wait so that I could cross the street to get to where I need to go to someone's the street, right? And I remember being halfway across this, floor, thinking, where am I? I almost forgot I'm at like a workplace, because it was like FAO Schwartz. Like, what am I doing here, right? And I think that's where, again, the myth we're tackling here is that ping pong table, right? We're calling it that, but you all know what your perks were, foosball, whatever it is, Beermeister, like whatever the stuff is that you had that was supposed to be rich for the work culture. We've worked from home for 2 years.
Well, and that's
right?
The interesting part about all of this is that it sort of shook everyone, and out of that, where all of a sudden that just dissipated. But then what does that show us today? And you made a really interesting point to me earlier, John, about, the ping pong table, it had its role and its place. It wasn't just, while we're sitting here saying, I feel like we're sort of bad mouthing the ping pong table and
poor ping pong tables.
The poor ping pong table, but that the real purpose of that was we were in a different state and time, and it was to create the opportunity or allow people to have the opportunity to create relationships and the connections at work. And so maybe it's just that the time and place for the ping pong table has evolved a little beyond that. We have the opportunity to have the relationships, and now it's again going to a deeper level around engagement.
Yeah, I would say what we've experienced, again, not for all organizations, but for many over the past couple of years, when we had to sort of be obedient to mandates and a change to how work was being done. So we switched from ping pong tables to, Zoom happy hours. And everybody said, right, remember everybody, oh, like the first couple of months, it was like, these are fun. These are fun. March, April, May, look at us, we're having fun. By September, people are like, I don't want to have a drink with you again on this platform. I don't want to do it. And so, you're right. This is really supposed to be about developing and forming relationship. So the question that everybody has to ask themselves organizationally is, right, what are your ping pong tables? Like, what have been those things that have been sort of the relational platforms that you thought were going to handle the development of rapport and connection? And how do we approach it differently, right? How do we approach it with more intention? You can't just roll in a ping pong table and call it a day. It's not going to work.
Well, and I think about, and by the way, I'd love to invite anyone in the chat that's such a great question. What are the ping pong tables at your organization? Whether they're the things that are the distraction or the things that are actually really helpful, because it's evolving. And that's because of the pandemic, but it's also just it would have evolved anyway, right? So we've come into a time where I think when you think about old school workplace and feeling, that you have to be, chained to your desk, and that your manager's looking over your shoulder to make sure you're really working. But the fact that the ping pong table was the organization inviting people to, giving permission that it's okay for you to build and deepen those connections with your colleagues. We see the importance of that. And then how does this bring us in today, where we have such an important focus across almost every, if not every organization around DE&I, and a sense of belonging and that shift. And so it's where maybe that idea a few years ago of the importance of connecting with your colleagues and working together was newer. And now people are starting to see that there's real business benefits to that, and that when the way people work together, and again, that this is important to workers, and people are expecting this from their organization, and so organizations have to evolve to this, and there will be new and deeper things that bring this to life.
And I think, and I love the statistics you're putting up here, right, on this particular slide around respect. It's so funny because I know we all can remember, we can remember pre-pandemic. I believe in us, right? I know we can. And there were so many, conversations around generations, right, in the workplace, and what works for the, Gen X versus Gen Z, and what works for the, and look, all of that aside, look at some of these statistics. There's an overall desire for respect that's at 72%. That has nothing to do with generation. It has not. It's about people. It's about being thoughtful about people, listening to people, encouraging people. Because if you want to foster a sense of belonging at your organization so that people can actually feel that they belong, you can tell me all day long, we foster a sense of belonging. It only is really true if people feel like they belong. Right. That's how you know. That's your litmus test, right? And so I think that organizations have started. I can't say that we're like, batting 1,000. I think organizations have started to look at this and think, I've got to stop looking at my organization as if it's a static reality. It's a dynamic reality, not just in productivity, but in people. And so every person that comes into your organization is a new thread in the tapestry of what your organization is going to look like moving forward. They're a new thread. It's not the same pattern continuing. It's a new thread being introduced. And if you know anything about tapestries, that's how it's done, right? And so that new color of thread, that new thickness of thread, that new material in the thread, whatever it is coming into your organization. And there's an inclusiveness that can really benefit the organization. Tons of statistics, right, around how much more productive and profitable organizations that are really thoughtful about inclusivity are. I think that respect quotient is core to all of that. And
what you make me think of, John, when you say that, I just moved into another slide of proving that exactly what you're saying, but it's in the past, I think it was much more driven by the culture was driven by the organization, and sort of, here's the box that we want people to fit in. And yes. It was much more about, you're here to do XYZ job and get a paycheck. And now it's more about, what do you offer to the organization? And it's more driven by the employees. The employees are the human beings that make up they are the organization, and they are creating the culture. And so having come to the table and be a part of that tapestry, first of all, how just that analogy of feeling like you're really a part of something, I think we can all understand how that obviously makes you feel so much more connected than sort of, I'm here to just get in line and do my job and be a number and be a robot. That's not what we're all human beings. And so it's, again, an exciting time that these things are resonating more and more. in leadership and throughout organizations. And again, it ties back to, just to share the last bit of data we have here for this particular myth and this topic, is that the manager connection, and coming back to that idea of psychological safety, that when employees have that respect, when they feel like they have their manager is making time to check in with them regularly, all of these things that they have psychological safety, and that impacts the downstream effects of them staying in the organization longer, being more productive, being more engaged. So all positive things there. I'm going to move us into myth number 4. We're going right along through the list. And this one's a really interesting one. Just keep saying I'm sorry. And just to tee this up a little bit about what did we mean with this? I think we were talking about how this has probably always been the case, but just the people saying in an organization, I'm sorry that, you have to come in to the office. Right. I'm sorry that you have to work late. I'm sorry that you have a lot of work on your plate, that you have to take on this extra project. And when we started honing in on this topic, it became so clear. This one was kind of exciting as we dug into it, that this one almost could be a quick fix of, instead of saying, what do you mean when you say I'm sorry? You're really trying to express empathy and express that you see that person and appreciate that person. So what if we could catch ourselves doing that and instead say thank you to people? What might that impact be? Because that's what we really mean.
Well, right. And I think that, especially well-meaning, right? HR folks, managers that have a good gauge on empathy, right? That there's been so much that's not been easy, particularly the past couple of years, right? And so we default to an apologetic stance. Now, I mean, there's always there's a couple of perspectives to that all the time. As far as I know, there's no one individual responsible for COVID-19. So when you apologize for all of this, don't own what you don't need to own. There's plenty for you to own. You can be empathetic to say, it's really something that we're going through all this, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things that this leads to in our effort to be empathetic is actually, I think in many ways, we've created a bit of a caste system when it comes to roles. Why am I apologizing to someone who has to actually come into work or go to a job site to physically do work that they have a skill set and a passion for? Why would I'm so sorry that you have to come in and make the pizzas for the people that are ordering them. I'm so sorry that you have to come in and handle the servers for the entire organization so that we can, I'm so sorry. When we do that, we relegate almost those in-person roles as being less than the lucky people that get to work from home. And that's the wrong approach to it, because there is not a role inherently better than another. That ought not to be the impression that you give. And the I'm sorry phrase can set it up to be so. And we've got to be really, really thoughtful. As much as the I'm sorry is maybe coming out of a good place, you're trying to be thoughtful empathetically to others, it may be leading you down a road that you don't mean to go down, and you don't need to.
And sort of what is that implying, or that it's you're potentially feeding into this, as the employee on the receiving end of, oh wow, I wasn't even really concerned with going to the office, but now I feel sorry for myself because you just apologized to me, and I feel like this is an injustice. And so how much does it become the self-fulfilling prophecy versus what? And I think that it's what when we thought about this is that you're really trying to communicate that empathy, and that you see and value the work that's being done and the contributions of the individual. And it's much more, and I have some, because of course at Workhuman, like I said, we're in the thank you business. So I've pulled in a couple of examples of this, but we know that, and I think, you can understand anecdotally too, all the positive impacts of how that makes you feel differently when someone says thank you. That, these are impacts from that people are less likely to look for a job. They're more likely to be engaged, to feel respected, to see that they have opportunity in the organization. But I'm sure we've all had a moment where someone has seen our work and our value and said thank you. And how amazing does that make you feel? That I would so much rather hear that message of thank you for everything that you've done than I'm sorry you have to do this.
And I'm going to say too, if I may, thank you for everything you've done. And there are times when you might want to say, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that that's how you were feeling, but thank you so much for sharing that, right? Like it may be hard things as well, but that thank you still can matter so much.
Such a good, I mean, we've been having this conversation about psychological safety and talk about that simple phrase contributing to that and making it that you respect that it's hard to give feedback and say things that are difficult. And so to feel that the other person is receptive to that and in fact grateful for it, that's an incredible point. I love that. The other things that we had here about saying thank you, positive impacts is that, this one is interesting. There's a nuance of it of public thanks. And when people see things shared, at Workhuman, we talk about the fact that when you share recognition moments and the good work that people are doing, that you're showcasing how they're living your company values, that you're showing others what good looks like, but also the importance of how it makes the person feel that their work is being celebrated. That it's I'm not going to just thank you over here in the shadows, but I actually am really acknowledging and celebrating the contributions that you've made. So that's another great benefit of this. And we've seen a lot of this with our customers over the last couple of years for the parts of organizations of employees that have been on the front lines, healthcare workers at pharmaceutical companies that are working on solutions and so many other things. Just I'm talking about things related to the pandemic, but every organization in every industry has been affected in some way. And we've seen lots of moments where either on an individual state, but even from an organization at a leadership level, whether it's for a business unit or the CEO sending out something to the entire organization to say thank you for all of the things that you're doing, and acknowledging as an organization that again, it's about being seen and about the fact that the extra effort that people are putting in is not just going under the radar. So an interesting point there.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I know that we've seen at Workhuman, because I just know, right, is that because the workforce isn't as central in terms of physical location as it once was, there are still, even organizations that do have on-site required roles, there may be support staff that are working hybrid or remotely. And so the interaction of departments to see some of the successes of each other may not be as easy, obviously, to see because you're not physically together. And so to be thoughtful about public thanks and public praise, early on in my career, that was one of there's a few things that I was told in my career that have stuck with me, and it, praise in public, coach in private, right? And so the idea of being able to give people praise publicly is also about tonality in an organization as well. You want to affect culture, if that's really part of what you want to be thoughtful of in this. And so your I'm sorries are empathetic in your mind. Really be empathetic in the way in which you recognize people. That's a much richer way to be thoughtful about your teams.
Absolutely. And then this last point here for this one, that the benefit to the giver I know that I feel so much better delivering the message of thank you, I appreciate you, than I'm sorry that I'm making you do this. And so, and we do see that in the data as well, that it is something, and it's the just psychologically focusing on the things that we've all been through difficult times, but focusing on the things that you're thankful for, the things that are going well, the things that people are doing right, that mindset Obviously, really important benefits there. So I want to take us into, again, we keep talking about all of these for so long. So but being conscious of time, we have to move on into myth number 5. And this is a really hot topic, obviously. I think this is the phrase, the Great Resignation. It's, within the last 6, 8, 9 months, we've seen this all of a sudden surge into the headlines and sort of, John, this is one where I really want your opinion on what you're seeing. And why do you think that this is happening, that we have this sudden influx of people leaving their jobs or moving into a different organization? What's your take?
I mean, right, we could talk about this one for a good hour. The amount of reasons, right, can vary. I think that there are some things that have really sort of kicked the consideration to leave for individuals into high gear, one of them being compensation. As I said at the onset, I've been involved in human resources for 30 years. I've never seen a year like 2021. The amount of compensatory increase quarter over quarter. I mean, some roles 5 to 11% per quarter. That's an incredible amount of money and an incredible amount of opportunity for people. And to leave one place to go to another. Hard to say no to some of those things, right? And we know that. But to think that it's all about resignation is, I think, that's short-sighted, right? Like they're not resigning from the workforce. They've left your organization and gone into another, and so it's a reshuffle, right? We talk about this even in prep for this time today. Like there's a lot to be thoughtful of as to why would someone want to reshuffle out of where they are into somewhere else? That's got to be the question.
And well, I think this ties so nicely into all of the things that we've been talking about, because it's ultimately the shift in employees are more in the driver's seat here, because it's a hot job market, so they have more opportunities, but it's forcing employers to maybe evolve more quickly than in many cases they're ready to, because they have to react to this. And we talked about, I think it's a great point of like really taking a sharp look into compensation, and that, how can you get people can you be proactive about that? So you're keeping people versus having them go somewhere else, and then you're hiring someone still at a higher rate, right? Sort of getting proactive on that. And then we talked about a couple of other different topics that I want to ask for your insight on here, John, as well. You had brought up that that onboarding is huge here.
It's amazingly huge. Yeah, people underestimate this. This statistic I think is just revolutionary in the way in which it will cause organizations to rethink how they're doing things. Poorly onboarded staff, right? Pre-COVID, statistically, research tells us they lasted about 6 months in an organization. If they were poorly onboarded, they didn't stay for longer than 6 months. During COVID, with all of, you can work from home, you could have a laptop, you can do this, it's still 6 months. Still 6 months for poorly onboarded staff. The perk isn't, you get to work from home. I'll deal with this for a year, for 2 years, until the job market. Individuals are saying, I don't want to put up with it for any longer. If I'm not brought on well, it's a marker of the way in which this organization is going to function. And I'm going to, work myself in and out of this organization relatively quickly.
To me, this is why we're talking about these myths, because what do we believe to be the truth versus this was the same before and after, right? And so instead of debating and blaming and scapegoating the pandemic, let's actually take the step back and look at onboarding and how can we make it better. And I think that just brings it to light so much. And to add to that, this is a Workhuman data, again, from our most recent report, 2 years into COVID, that surprisingly, COVID new hires are some of the most engaged. So that just even supports that it really is, it's more the individual experience than the outside world environment that's influencing this.
Yes. And this is a great spot also to mention that you can have, this is going to blow people's minds. And so I'll apologize in advance. Get ready. You can continue to have engaged employees who leave your organization. Wait for it. You can have engaged employees who leave your organization because you're honest with them about how far your organization can take them. And say, if you've gotten another offer, if there's other opportunities, and we can't give those to you at this moment, our door is wide open. Go get what you can get in terms of skilled, general competencies, whatever those areas are for knowledge, whatever it is. Can we talk again in a year? In 2 years? Can we keep in communication? Because I want to keep the door open for you to, and we hear the term boomerang employees, to take what you've learned and come on back in. When someone keeps a door open, and I'm saying someone as like a business leader or a manager says, I'm not mad. I get why you need to take this other opportunity to skill up to a place that we can't yet do it. Would you think about bringing that back in here to help establish for future employees how they could skill up right here with your help? We've got to be thoughtful about that. This market is too difficult right now. To not be thoughtful about boomerang is unwise.
And I think that what you're making me think of is something that I see as a trend is, and in the conversations I've had with customers, is there's a shift and a much more prominent focus on employee experience, but that it's going straight through until the end of the tenure for the employee at the organization, that it matters right up until you might be leaving. But I think there's always been the sort of the adage of, don't burn a bridge when you're leaving an organization and stuff, but a little bit of like that emphasis is happening on the employer side too, of the value of wanting to keep that positive connection. And then in talking about boomerang employees as well, of how can we, what you sort of were touching on there, John, is you have at some point maybe you've reached the top or the pinnacle of what you can do within a specific organization, but in addition to onboarding, this is one opportunity where organizations can dig in and think about how can I increase the internal mobility, because even if I have a person moving department to department, but just the fact of the insights and the skills and the history they have with the organization and the knowledge they had in the organization, that it's still valuable to keep those employees.
Absolutely.
We all know the cost of turnover. And so this is another area that I think that we're seeing as an important focus. So I wish we had more time to keep talking about all of these things, but just a quick summary as we jump into our Q&A is just some key takeaways here of all the things that we talked about: the importance of listening and really listening to understand what the employee experience is, being open to new ways of working that, and let's not be so prescriptive. The really important, I think it almost wove through all of the different topics that we went through today, the importance of psychological safety and creating that environment of trust, openness, stop apologizing and start saying thank you, and the prioritization of the human being, the experience, thinking about how can we create those opportunities. And so very much appreciate, John. What a great discussion. Thank you so much. We have, we've been looking into I've been keeping an eye over here, and we have some really great questions that have come in through the Q&A section. So I want to take a minute to just answer some of these. We'll take about 5 minutes to go through the questions. This is a good one. This is a meaty question. As an HR professional, I know what you're saying is true, so I'm bought into this, but how do I get buy-in from the C-level? And so I think this is something that I see so often with the folks that I'm working with, that they get it, they see it, but the real challenge is how do I communicate to my stakeholders, whoever they are, leaders and other groups, and bring them on board. Do you have any advice on this one, John?
Well, sure. I don't know if I can give you all, right? I mean, here's some things I would say, and I'm not in any particular order. So, whatever would work for the individual or people listening, right? How they can apply it to their organization. Part of it is how transparent in a lot of what we've already spoken about are your C-level in your organization. Meaning, is there transparency with the data you're dealing with about turnover, about onboarding, about employee survey, about anything that's going to give that kind of feedback? Do your C-suite have insight into those things? Are you just holding on to the information at the HR level and sort of giving a very pared down version in a report to a VP or one person, but it's not really getting to all the powers that be, let's say? I would encourage you to try to get as much granular detail to the C-level, not to bore them with, a 58 slide deck, but rather to say, look, go through this at your leisure. Here's some easy statistics for you to look at in terms of what's happening at the company. I think that'll help to bring some issues to light that then can be unpacked for them to create buy-in. The other thing I would say is invite some of the C-level individuals to some stay interviews, right? Have them sit with you as you
talk. By a stay interview, John?
Yeah, if you have some employees that are sticking with you, they didn't jump on the comp train and get out of your organization because they think they can make 40% more, right? If they're staying, I think there's such value in sitting with your CEO, COO, CFO, whoever it is, and saying to that person, Mary, why are you staying at this company? We love that you're here. Why do you choose to stay here?
Yeah.
And for that C-suite executive to hear a few people share thoughts on that, and do them one at a time. Don't bring everybody in and ask that question. Do one person at a time. That could be really enlightening for that C-suite executive to understand why a lot of the things we're talking about here do matter.
You know what I love about that is that it's also focusing, I'm sure, and as business leaders, as HR people, we all hear, like, you're peppered every day with the negative, like the squeaky wheels, and how the perspective of what's going right and what's going well, and how inviting, within leaders in an organization at a C-level have to be hearing, oh, this is going wrong. How do we solve this problem? We all have endless problems to solve in the business world, right? But how refreshing to take a look at, okay, what are the things that are going well, and how can we propagate those and continue those things happening more? That's a really, I love that that recommendation. We're really short on time, so I'm going to unfortunately we're going to cut the Q&A short, but I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is another meaty one, but I love this question, and I'm really excited to hear your answer about this, John. Of what are the biggest HR challenges in the next year ahead? So are there any things that you see that are, we've already talked about, we've had some in the last 2 years, but what do you think is next, or going to be the next thing to tackle?
Well, this answer may be surprising to you. I actually think one of the challenges that we're going to face is there are more HR people leaving HR. And because the pandemic as primary reason has been so taxing on individuals in the HR space to a degree that some have never really been trained to handle. And it's taken a lot out of individuals. And so our challenge is going to be to keep human resources practitioners engaged, cared for, and able to do their best work at organizations. That's going to be something that's going to require our focus, I'm going to say, this year.
And especially tying this back to a point you made at the very beginning, where HR is becoming more critical than ever to a business. And it's, that is, so the pressure is higher, but then with less resources. One thing I will say is that I've really, thank you so much for joining us for this, John, and for all of your perspectives. And one thing I will say is that this discussion and the things that we do at Workhuman is that I think it's also you're not alone in that fight. So one of the things that can really combat that is, coming together and having discussions like this and talking about this. So these challenges are big challenges.
Yes.
And so it takes time, and things aren't overnight. And so hopefully folks listening in sort of have leave here feeling that like, okay, it's not just me, like this stuff is real.
Yes.
And that there are lots of opportunities in these moments of where we're going. It's challenging but exciting times that we're experiencing. So thank you again, John, so much for the very fascinating and fun conversation.
Yeah.
And
thank you, Erin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you, and have a wonderful afternoon.